Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Pilot Lawyer Podcast. Thank you for your attention while this important legal information is reviewed. What you hear should not replace consultation with an attorney and should not be considered advice for your situation. On behalf of the Pilot Lawyer and your entire crew, it's our pleasure to have you aboard.
Welcome, aviators, to the Pilot Lawyer Podcast with us, the Ison Brothers at the Ison Law Firm. You're here for what we do best, navigating the FAA medical certification process for pilots and those who want to become pilots. Of course, if you don't laugh, you cry. And for the next 30 minutes, we hope to bring you the lighter side of what can otherwise be a frustrating process. So whether you're laughing at us or with us, join us, brothers, as we discuss the fascinating world of FAA medical certification.
I don't want to make you redo that again, but of course, if you don't laugh, you cry. What is it? You missed a crucial sentence.
As we say around the office.
If you don't laugh, you cry. There you go. Fine. Move on.
Where have you been?
I don't know.
Working.
Hardly working at it or hardly... Wait, what is it?
Working hard or hardly working?
Working at it.
Yeah, constantly working.
Yes, sir. It's a new year and a new us. And we...
The same old us.
Is it though? We dedicate ourselves to the clients that we'll be having more episodes. Maybe even some video.
Whoa.
But they're still trying to get the IMAX camera in. Get those wide angle shots.
Wide lens, please.
Once we figure out that little mechanical conundrum, engineering marvel,
we'll be on
from
MIT.
YouTube.
And, just a quick reminder.
The Hubble telescope is being recommissioned.
The joke is done. I think we've... The interesting thing, though, is that as maybe our listener remembers, we had sort of taunted a book coming out in 2025. Well, here it is, 2025, and...
Nary a word has been written.
Well, don't say that. People might find out.
I'll get ChatGPT to put something together.
We'll throw it together at the last second.
Actually, there's a clause, I think, in the contract that you can't use ChatGPT to write it.
That's true. Well, you're gonna get fresh content from ChatGPT idiots. Also, an interesting thing. I wanted to advertise this a little. That I'm just seeing if they've put me on yet. I don't know. I'm looking actively here to see Sun Fun's coming up.
You don't want to get Big Sun mad at you, B.
I don't want to get Big Sun, but I want to look at my pasty face. I've never had Big Sun. But hey, I was just checking here to see if they've added my name to the schedule, as they say. They have not added my name to their schedule. But I will be
pending addition to the schedule.
pending that. Looks like I might be talking at the old Sun and Fun International Aerospace Expo fly-in and extravaganza.
Doesn't aerospace, the space component just seems a bit on the nose. I mean, like, who's going to space? Nobody's going to space. I know
your mom's
Elon.
going to space.
Well.
So Friday, April 4th, 10 a.m. is the slot I requested.
What date was that?
Friday, April 4th, 10 a.m.
Too bad it wasn't on April 1st.
Yeah,
right.
That would be a joke. But April 4th, 10 a.m. If you come down there, we're having a doorbuster sale. If you see us at Sun and Fun, you'll have the same rates as everyone else. So come on down, just busting our doors.
Actually, maybe you should do a raffle at the...
I'm sure that's illegal.
Why? It doesn't have to be for... We're not schlopping the law firm down there, you know? We could just say, hey, listen.
Schlopping the shit.
You could just say, hey, you know, we're... If you had a raffle, listen, everything we do around here is always weighed against the ethical constraints by the Florida bar. If we didn't have ethical constraints... Katie bar the door. we would. Oh, the
I think
things
that's
we
the
could
problem
say.
with lawyers. And that's probably those rules.
That's probably
are
why
in
they
place.
have those rules. Yeah, so you can't say some
that
crazy
in
stuff.
That in my
so Anthony's concern
stomach
is
aches all the time.
Anthony's concern
about
is that if you had some kind of raffle at the Talk at Sun and Fun to encourage people to come in, that it might run afoul.
Yeah, run afoul. I'm not running
run
afoul.
afoul
I've never run anywhere. I'm definitely not running afoul.
When did you become a duck? Anyhow.
He's on today.
Are ducks fouls?
I don't know. I was fishing out in Tampa Bay a couple weekends ago, and I saw a guy out there shooting ducks in the middle of the bay.
Shooting?
He was actually out there shooting. I thought, geez, that's...
Not the only bird that was shot at you
and
that
here's
day.
the crazy thing. Here's the crazy thing about it. He was right next to the runway for MacDill. There was like a little area.
This is crazy.
I know. I thought, that's mighty bold, sir. That's a bold strategy.
Got even crazier when you got the rocket launcher out.
Yeah. Anyhow, so there was an aviation component to it there in some respects because it was right next to that runway at MacDill in the water.
Where is this all
Shooting
leading
ducks.
to? The raffle. You were talking about a raffle.
Yeah. So I think your concern was, would that be some kind of unethical thing to have a raffle
I think
a law firm involved?
But I think raffles have their own laws. Like, you can't just have a raffle. There's an episode
That's true. I did take tax law in law school, and there has to be.
You took tax law in law school. You didn't take it somewhere else.
What did I say? Gambling.
I
did take tax law. I don't practice tax law.
Obviously. They practice you.
Gambling. I took gambling law in law school. And,
wow. Tell us about it.
There is, but I think if you just,
I guarantee people have fast forward to the first 6 seconds here. 6 minutes.
I could go on a rant there with the whole gambling thing.
But I guess my point is there was an episode of I Love Lucy where she and Ethel wanted to go to Europe and Ricky wouldn't give them the money to go with them. They had to raise their own money. So they made up a charity. I guess that's their first problem. They made up a charity and they had a raffle for tickets that they were selling off a TV that was given to the fake charity. And not to ruin it for you, but it has been like 70 years. So you haven't seen it by now. But come to find out that the DA got hot on the fact that Lucy had this fake charity and she was taking this raffle money just for herself to go to Europe. And at the last second, when the DA was about to haul her off to the pokey, come to find out there was a real charity by the same name, and the woman happened to have heard about the raffle, and she was there and so grateful that Lucy and Ethel had orchestrated this raffle for her charity, which really did exist, but she was kind of saved by the bell. So I guess the point being here is that we do have a legitimate business, but there are rules. There are rules, and I don't want anybody to think. I guess the main point here is that there won't be a raffle. So
Rules or suggestions?
we don't have anything to raffle off other than our bodies. Nobody wants that.
Hide your body.
Please, put a shirt on, sir.
Anyhow,
that's crazy. A lot of people seem to listen to this podcast. Or we talk to people that have listened to it.
So there's more than a listener?
Yeah, it's
there's
odd.
listeners? It's plural?
Seems like we're up into the single digits still, but more than one single
all
digit.
on one hand. All right, so
now that we've got
the clock has rolled over to January 1, 2025 already. We're several days into the year. And one question I've already received multiple times is, how is this new FAA deferral process? How's that going to ruin my situation?
I heard they deferred it until March.
That's right. Good one.
See what I did there?
So the problem here is that the FAA announced that they were no longer going to handle medical deferrals the same way they have been for the past, since Wilbur and Orville probably got deferred for their first flight. The idea is that historically, what even happens to the date of this podcast episode, which is January 2025, 17, is that, so if you're listening to this in the future,
that's cool.
Well, hello, future boy. But the idea is right now, 2025, January 17, is that if you got deferred, let's say you went to your aviation medical examiner, and the examiner said, hey, I can't issue your medical certificate because you have X, Y, and Z. And X, Y, and Z says, warrants deferral. What'll happen is you won't be issued in the on the spot by the AME. And then the FAA will eventually send you a letter, assuming you don't send documentation in support of your eligibility to their office along with your application, or have previously. Essentially, they're going to send you a letter and say, hey, it looks like you've had a heart attack because you were so worried about this raffle you fictitiously created. And as a result of your heart attack, we need, all that, the cardiac protocol following a heart attack. That's what would happen. During that period of time, from AME's office to the FAA ultimately reviewing your documentation, right? They go through the process, they review your file, and render a decision. Either they deny you or they issue your medical certificate. You don't really have a medical during that time. You're as though you've applied for a medical. It's like...
this is how the process has historically been.
Yeah,
right?
it's as though it's like I applied to college. I applied to...
I'm waiting for admission.
But I'm not a college student, So until I'm admitted, right? And I think that's a concept that...
you've applied, but now send us 3 letters from responsible adults that say that you know...
Yeah, you stopped
your
drinking
grammar.
or whatever. Right, so...
I thought we were using the college.
We are. I mean, it's the same thing.
Same thing.
So in that capacity, that's, I think, an analogy that a lot of people need to understand to be able to understand what's happening here generally. I think right now the thought process, what is of concern, so let's say I have a first-class medical and I'm under the age of 40. That medical, in theory, is good for 5 years, right? So it's not going to be a first class that whole time. It's going to drop down to a second class and then to a third class. And I'll have a medical certificate for 5 years, in theory, right? But if I go and apply for a new medical certificate,
after your first class.
Yeah, the first class drops to a second, and I need a first class to do my bidding, right? Or whatever. There is a mystery wrapped in an enigma as to what happens to that certificate, that first class certificate that still has that 5-year duration at the time I'm deferred. Our position has always been that, once you're deferred, it sort of invalidates the old medical certificate if it has any time left on it. It invalidates it.
This is a safe and conservative approach.
Yes, it invalidates it. And then you really don't have a medical certificate. At that time, you're pending a decision. You've applied for a medical. Now, again, this question hasn't really been answered. And if you're one of the individuals out there, one of these Mensa types that has the answer, you don't. But if you do, give us a call.
Oh, we did ask the FAA for that.
You never
did that.
I pulled it back. Pulled back the question.
Never mind.
Because this happened like the day after I was going to do that, and it was just everybody was panicking. I figured, if I ask this question, they change the law, then everybody's be railing against us in that raffle. So, all this to be said, the question is, if I have time left on my old application, is that medical still good? Or is that medical into the ether? Is it just kind of go away? Now, there's a few arguments you can make as far as due process is concerned. Well, that medical can't just go away, right? They can't just say that medical is no good anymore. They have to give you, after 60 days, the medical certificate is deemed validly issued. And if I'm 2 years into a medical certificate that has 3 years left on it, in theory, they'd have to give me some due process to be able to fight taking that medical certificate away. They can't just say poof, as you're known to say, Christopher. Poof, this is gone.
Interestingly, now this is going to get in the weeds. This is going to get in the weeds. But when somebody allegedly falsifies a medical application and they've had a history of multiple applications that have supposedly been falsified, when they bring their order of revocation in there, they'll specifically reference medical certificates by date, and then they'll do a broad catch-all of any unexpired medicals, right? So if somebody's doing that scenario that you just referenced, where you're getting a first class every time it's stepping down, and you're just going back for first class, even though maybe you're on the age of 40, you could, in theory, have like 3 or 4 applications that could still be valid that you could operate under. And so they always reference those by date in those applications. So maybe they think, I think they think you still have a valid medical, even if you've been deferred.
Well, even if you get deferred and you get denied, in theory, they could say, you still have this these other medicals that are good, but that gets really in the weeds because then you've been denied. Don't let that confuse you.
And then you get into the whole 6153 argument.
Well, I'm about to get there. You keep cutting ahead.
Well,
it's
listen,
like driving in a car with Alex. You just keep cutting people off.
Hey, they get my way.
Anthony will lean over to me when Alex is driving. He goes, "Is this the most scariest experience of your life?"
JK, dog. Anyhow, so the idea...
That's why I get there in time.
Right. So the idea here is that as it stands right now, if you get deferred, is a gray area legally and in theory as to whether or not you legitimately have a valid medical. But our position here is that once you apply for a medical and it's deferred, you're not eligible for basic med. And furthermore, so you're not eligible for basic med because for basic med, your most recent medical application has to have been validly issued. And if your most recent medical application was deferred, you're not eligible for basic med anyhow at that point. So that's number one. Number two, if you get deferred at that point, the relevant regulation is 14 CFR 61.53, which sort of suggests if you know or have reason to know of a medical deficiency, you should self-ground, in which case, if you know by nature of your AME deferring your application that you may have a medical deficiency such that your AME wasn't comfortable issuing your medical certificate or otherwise unable to issue your medical certificate, you have reason to know of a medical deficiency in theory. And in that regard, the FAA could pursue an action against you under 6153. That's all to say is that, again, your most recent medical application was not validly issued, notwithstanding basic med. Your most recent medical was not issued. You were still in this gray area of whether or not you are eligible to hold a medical certificate or not. You're not in college. You've applied. You're not in college yet.
Has your FAA medical certificate been denied? Are you concerned you may not be able to get a medical certificate from the FAA? Are you at risk for FAA action for failing to report your medical history appropriately? Call the pilot lawyer at 1-855-FAA-1215 to discuss your options for getting the FAA to issue your medical certificate and get you flying. We are happy to evaluate your case and discuss with you a plan for presenting your case to the AME or the FAA. Aviation law is all we do, nothing else.
Now, with that being said, if I may.
What are you saying?
I know you're zoned out. It's like a solo show. It's like
by this point, the people have...
No, I'm just trying to explain to them.
If you're listening to this while you're flying, God save you.
Yeah.
You're going to zone out.
Well, I'm just trying to lay the groundwork because everybody has seen the new change and they've panicked. They've panicked. Oh my God, I'm going to get denied. So what's happened now is the FAA says, well, if you get deferred, what they said was going to happen January 1, 2025. If you get deferred, we're going to... And we receive your application, we don't have supporting documentation that we can just look at and say, yep, you're eligible to hold a medical, here it is. We're going to send you a denial letter. Okay, big whoop. And I say big whoop because at the same time, they're going to say, hey, we're denying you for now, but if you send us X, Y, and Z, we'll send this back into reconsideration. The idea is that these are generally going to be non-final denials. So it gets into a nuance of what's a final denial where you can appeal to the NTSB, and then a non-final denial under the regulations, which suggests that you can ask for reconsideration essentially at any time of a denial. But the idea here is that they're going to say, hey, we're just going to put you in this denied bin, but we're still looking at this. This is what we need. Now, the benefit to that for the FAA, I think, is that they don't have to keep track of deadlines. And so in other words, and there's benefit to the airmen as well, in that right now as it stands, if you get a letter from the FAA on a deferral, they'll say, hey, we need this documentation within 60 days, right? And then you're having a calendar of 60 days. And then, I can't get it in time. My doctor can't see me, or, I've fallen ill with, a cold and I can't go and do this test and I'm not going to get the 60 days. So, the 60 days are getting close. And then, can I get an extension on this? And then they give you extension, but they only give you a 30-day extension. And then you're tracking time, tracking deadlines. And then the FAA says, well, hey, you never got this to us, so we're going to do a failure to provide denial, right? You never gave us this information. And I think to some extent, the nuance of them trying to change The process here is that they're trying to get rid of failure to provide denials because the NTSB, as I understand, was being inundated with people trying to appeal denials on failure to provide denials. And they couldn't take it anymore. So the FAA sort of came up with this plan where, hey, we won't have to require, documentation within a certain period of time. We'll just deny them and say, hey, when you have it, send this to us.
I wonder what happens, though, once you send stuff in and they start looking at it and then they ask for additional information to be provided and you don't provide that to them. Seems like the failure to provide denial is still going to be there.
No, because if you get denied and they say, send us X, Y, and Z, you send them X, Y, and Z, and they don't like it, they're just going to say, hey, you're still denied, but when you want, send this to us. Does that understand?
That makes sense.
They should really make it like a reconsideration denial or something like that. Or
well, they do
reword it
that
to
now, right? To where they'll send you. This is something they do all the time. Now, what people are panicky about, say, I'll have a denial. I'll have a denial on my record. Well, number one, a medical denial is not a violation or like a denial for an application in the capacity that this was a medical eligibility type of denial rather than it being something where, hey, I was denied a certificate because I failed a check ride or something along those lines. That's number one. Number two, this is going to stay largely between you and the FAA through your protected medical information. The only time that you could potentially have a concern is if your medical is denied. You have to report that at question 13 on your medical application. And there's a lot of thought that, if I do that, my AME is going to have to automatically defer me. I'm going to automatically get deferred. Okay, but if the FAA has cleared you of this, they've said, hey, your heart attack is fine. Here's a special issuance or here's a medical certificate. Yes, on your next application, you say, it got denied during that process. But the FAA cleared me of this issue because they looked at it, my medical certification throughout the process, and they issued the medical certificate. And the AME is going to say, okay, great, right? The denial on the issue that's cleared becomes moot. It becomes moot. So that's point number one that people are panicky about. The second point was that people were saying, this is going to deprive people of being able to fly. If they go and they get deferred and they still have time left on their previous application or their previous medical, right, as we discussed, if they still have time on their previous medical and they go get deferred and they get denied, they won't be able to fly anymore. It's going to deprive them of their opportunity to fly in a second class, or it's going to deprive them of their opportunity to fly in basic med, which again, for basic med, our thought process is that, again, your most recent medical application wasn't validly issued. 6153 says if you know or have reason to know you should have a medical deficiency, you should self-ground. And so in that capacity, this change-up really doesn't make a hill of beans worth of difference, in my opinion. And I would say our collective opinion.
Well, Alex's opinion doesn't matter.
Alex, I was talking to somebody today, and he said, so it's you, your brother, Christopher, your lawyers, and you got another lawyer in there, and your brother's Scotty, right? For the listener, Scotty is our dad, so I'm not sure how he got that. How did you get that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, my middle name's Scott.
Yeah, that's a real twist.
Yeah. Well, Alex's middle name is Scott
too.
Yeah, maybe that. I don't know. That's odd.
It's weird.
That's weird.
That's strange. So that being said, everybody panicked. All the alphabet soup agencies and everybody said, well, hey, you can't do that. You really can't do that. And so now the FAA has deferred it until March. Excuse me. They've deferred the change on deferrals until March. So what's going to happen in March, Christopher? Can you give me a little song of your psyche into what do you think will happen in March? Because right now, as I understand it, the FAA is pausing to communicate with the industry and to better understand the concerns of those involved. But again, I got
it. You ready? This is what's going to happen in March.
Kicking the can
down the road.
Well, I think there's a lot of pressure on the FAA from the NTSB, it seems, to say, hey, you're sending out, you're doing too many of these failure to provide, because I think there's a lot of people that just apply, they don't do it, or they can't get something in there in time. They don't ask for an extension, or they don't realize that if they get a failure to provide, they can just still send the information in. But they'll see in these denial letters that says, hey, you can appeal this, which you do have the what's the word? The right to appeal it.
And those
now
are really specific arguments, though, that you're saying. Like, I did send this in, and you guys just didn't appreciate that I sent it in, or something along those lines. Or you lost it.
Your cat
but,
ate it.
Here it is. But even still, all you'd have to really do is really take that up with the. But they do don't come at me hot now, federal government. But the FAA does kind of a poor job at explaining some of these concepts in their letters. What?
Someone's at the door.
Who's that?
It's the FBI.
Oh, God. But,
just kidding. We're not being raided.
But still, I mean, I think if they did just a little bit better job, put just a few more words on a little scrap of paper that they send people, maybe it would preclude all this confusion.
If they just said in these failure to provides, hey, I think they do say this.
They need to say it better.
If you get the information, just send it in. We'll send this back into review as though nothing happened.
Yeah.
And maybe if they put little check marks next to it, or little swirly swirls or something.
Lord knows they have a printer.
Now we put out
they could do something.
I guess they do have a printer.
They're sending it out. Printer.
We put out a heck of a blog article.
They're trying to save ink.
We put a heck of a blog article.
Green New Deal right there.
And the thought process was that, we went through this, that we didn't think this changed basic med or sport pilot very much. It bears repeating, if I may, that, when, in light of the changes that are on the horizon, and even beforehand, it bears repeating that having documentation in place before you go to your examination with your AME always makes the most sense. And in that capacity,
if you're looking to streamline it, come in prepared.
Come at me hot.
I mean, it's not like you're going to go fly an airplane and then get up in the air and be like, oh, let's do the checklist now.
Let's do the pre-flight.
Yeah, let's start.
That's a little late for that start.
Yeah.
It's a little late. So you always want to have as much documentation with you going in. Now, sometimes it's not possible. And in a lot of cases we see, sometimes you have to say, well, hey, here's this. Take a look at this so we can kind of get take their temperature.
Temperature reading.
Take your temperature and see where the FAA is at on a certain position and what their thought process is. So,
is this a forehead scan or a rectal temperature?
This is definitely rectal. But we use the same device for both for the oral and rectal examination.
That always scared me as a child. Is it the blue one or the red one? Which one?
Don't come at me with that red one.
They were different.
Yeah.
Explains so much.
That's why your breath is always so bad.
I come in every day with a blood pressure reading and temperature. Okay. Now, another point worth making is that not all certification facilities, services, agencies handle denials. And so in that capacity, if you are deferred when this new program comes out and you are denied, it makes sense to work with somebody who can handle a denial. So whenever you're looking for medical certification service, inquire with them, voir dire them, as they would say. Voir dire. Ask them if they've ever dealt with denials.
I like the voir dire, the witness.
How would they handle a denial? What would they do? What's their solution? Because we have a lot of thoughts on that. We do that all the time.
We have thoughts.
That's literally all we do.
They're not good thoughts.
Or accurate, for that matter.
So I will not so subtly suggest that, just give us a call. Happy to help. But one time we had a negative comment on YouTube.
Is this Tree Hugger Joe?
Tree Hugger Joe. Literally, the podcast came out, and we were so excited to see it on YouTube. And there was the first comment, which was, it was vulgar in nature. I can't say it here. If our mom heard it, had to explain it to her, and then
I don't even remember the comment.
It was something about
a circular nature.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, he was right.
Well, that being said, I think we gave this one a good flog.
It's one could say it was a circular flog.
Sure. Well, at the end of the day, I'm pleased with the fact that this one is in the books and that we can just get back into our groove of.
I guess what's the ultimate takeaway? Something's going to happen in March.
Something may happen in March, may not. They may change it altogether.
It's not going to keep you from being able to go through the process.
Change. And if you're, I've buried the lead here. We've had clients that have called us and said, well, who are already in the process, or they're about to submit something to the FAA. Well, is this going to mess me up? Is this going to affect my case? No. I certainly don't see cases where somebody already has a medical and they're going in like midway with records on something that they're just going to come back. They can't just come back in with a denial at that point. They'd have to revoke your it gets too messy. I just don't. This is purely going to be, relative to you apply, you get deferred. It's not going to be something where, hey, maybe I have a medical and I'm submitting an amendment or something along those lines. Good question, Anthony. Thanks.
You win the raffle. Look at the raffle bee.
What kind of prize is this? It's wet and
slimy.
It's been sat on.
Why my hand's sticky now?
What?
You might want to take that.
What would
part
you?
out.
What would a raffle prize be?
One lunch with the Ison Brothers.
Give them a Cessna 172.
I don't want to do anything with aviation. Can't I have a life outside of airplanes and helicopters and the people that fly them?
It's called lunch.
Lunch. You can have a lunch with Christopher, Alex, and Anthony. Oh, some of the best times you're had at lunch. Join us, the Ison Brothers, at lunch sometime.
We're going to have to host a lunch.
We'll have a new podcast called The Chef's Kiss.
We can have someone. We can
Our
have
first guest will be the raffle winner.
That's
Gordon
interesting.
Ramsay.
That's interesting.
Now you're talking.
We should modify the format of this podcast into a call-in show.
A real click and clack situation.
Like Dave Ramsey, better than I should be. Well, you're stupid. You had a heart attack and now you're trying to get a medical. I'm just kidding. Obviously, you can't.
Normal people don't even try to fly.
Normal people don't have wings. You're stupid for trying to do that. We'll probably get sued for this. All right. So
It's parody.
Does that not count?
I don't think so.
Shouldn't when it's funny.
You're stupid. You went to your AME. You could have gone to a guy down at the docks.
That's the basic method.
And didn't pay.
Yeah, pretty much.
Didn't pay for it. Speaking of heart attacks, I feel like I'm having one now. So
It's supposed to be lunchtime.
Let's go. All right.
My ticker's telling me it's time to eat.
All right, we've gone too far.
All right. Well, we've crash landed this one. You logged another uneventful half hour listening to the Pilot Lord podcast. And as the waiters at Longhorn Steakhouse polished our forks in anticipation of our arrival, we are the Ison Brothers of the Ison Law Firm. Jeez.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.